Chapter 9. The Story of the Prince of Nimros.
Know, O friend, that I am the prince of this country of Nimros. The king, my father, at my birth, collected all his astrologers, soothsayers, and learned men, and asked them to cast my horoscope truthfully, and show it to him when it was completed. At long last they finished this work, and said,
"The prince has been born under such a propitious star that he ought to be equal to Alexander the Great at least. He will excel in every science that he learns, and will get everything that his heart desires. But until he is 14, he will be in great danger if he sees the sun or moon. He may become a maniac and shed the blood of many. Great care should be taken that he never sees the sun or the moon, or even glances towards the heavens. If this dangerous time passes away without incident, he can safely live for many years in peace and prosperity." On hearing this, the king my father caused this great garden to be laid out, and I was to be brought up in a vault, the dome of which was lined with felt, so that not a ray of light from either sun or moon should be able to enter. I had a nurse, and, later on, a tutor as well, to teach me everything about public affairs, also the 7 varieties of penmanship. I, of course, thought that that place was the whole world, played with my toys and amused myself in my own way. Every delicacy in the way of food was produced daily, and I was happy enough. One day, when I was growing up beneath that dome, an astonishing flower appeared from the skylight, getting larger every minute as I watched. I tried to seize it, but it eluded my grasp. Then I saw that a face was suspended there, a most beautiful face. When I saw it, I lost my senses with love. When I gained consciousness again, I looked up and saw that there was a gleaming throne of jewels raised on the shoulders of fairies. There was a fantastically beautiful being sitting upon it, with a crown of precious stones upon her head, and clothed in a superb robe, drinking wine from a ruby cup. The throne descended from its height to the floor, and the fairy called me to sit beside her on the magic seat. She said, in a thrilling voice, "The human race is faithless, but I love you." I felt so wonderful upon hearing this, that I only at that moment knew what it was to be happy. 4 fairies now came down and whispered something to the beautiful fairy lady. On hearing this, her colour changed, and she said, "Oh, my loved one, I meant to spend some time with you, and to take you with me, perhaps to some fabulous place, but fate will not permit 2 persons like us to remain in one place in happiness. So I must go. Farewell, my beloved." On hearing these terrible words, I lost all hope, for I was truly in love with her as never before in my life. "When shall we meet again?" I cried. "Are we ever to be happy once more together? Tell me your name, and where you live, so that I may look for you." "God forbid that you do," she answered. "I am the daughter of the king of the jinns, and I live in the mountains of Kaf." Suddenly, as she was speaking, the throne ascended and flew higher and higher. Our eyes were fixed on each other with such longing as it disappeared from sight. A terrible gloom fell upon me. Everything appeared to be dark and dreadful. I wept bitterly and tore my clothes. I could not eat or drink, nor cared for good or evil. My nurse went to my father, and trembling told him of the strange change that had come upon me. "Majesty," she said, falteringly, "this is the condition of the prince of the people of the world. Please come to him and see yourself, great king." With his nobles, doctors, and ancient wise men, the king entered my garden. He could scarcely comprehend that it was I who wept and moaned there, so changed was I. He tried to speak to me, but I would neither hear nor answer. He had with him the finest doctors in the kingdom, and gave instructions that I was to have the best attention for my malady, whatever it may be. Then I had to go through a great deal of ceremony, with examinations of the body,
The writing of talismans by holy men,
and others repeatedly praying for my return to health. Some blew upon me, hoping to dispel the evil which was attacking me. Others said that the trouble was all in my stars. Some said I should give pious donations to a certain charity. All this took some time.
but what was passing through my mind was the real torture.
Day after day my lunacy advanced, until I had been 3 years in this state. None of the prescribed treatments had any effect on my heartbreak. One day, a travelling merchant carrying many curios and valuables for sale came to the court, and my father spoke to him. "You have," he said graciously, "travelled in various countries, no doubt, in your search for these treasures. Have you, in any clime or dominion, seen or heard of a truly learned doctor who can cure strange mental diseases?" "Mighty king," said the traveller, "I know of such a man. In the middle of the river Ganges in Hindustan there is a small mountain. There a holy sect, the simplest of mendicants who have long hair and go almost naked, have built a large temple and a very beautiful garden. Once a year a wonderful man comes there and swims in the river. After washing himself, he goes to a certain spot where the sick and afflicted of all races, nations, and creeds come to be healed by him. He moves among them, feeling a pulse here, examining a bottle of urine there, giving each one a recipe. God has so gifted him that he can miraculously heal all whom he sees in this way. After taking his medicine, they are completely restored to health. This I have seen with these very eyes. Your Majesty desires it? I will take the prince of the people of the world to this man, so that he may regain his senses." The king was very pleased to have discovered a possible way to remove the melancholia from which I had now suffered for over 3 years, and plans were at once made for us to depart. After the long journey, we at last arrived at the river Ganges. From the change of air and new scenes on the way, my mind was rather more composed, but I was still absolutely silent. Often and often I thought of the Princess of the Fairies, and her picture was never absent from my vision. About 4,000 or 5,000 people were assembled on the rock, awaiting the saint's arrival, and I was one of that number. All near me said, "If God pleases, when the holy man comes to us, we will be cured." I hoped in my heart that it would be so in my case, although I did not want to forget my lady. Suddenly there was a cry, taken up by all, "He is here! He is here!" and the crowd surged forward. A man approached us, wearing a white loincloth, his body rubbed over with grey ash. He had a mark made by burnt sandalwood on his forehead, and his hair and moustache were long. Looking at each patient, he wrote a short prescription on paper and handed it to him or her. At last he came to me. For a moment he stared at me, and his strangely luminous eyes seemed to burn into mine. Then he dropped his gaze. "You must come with me," he said. "I will help you." I followed him where he led. I found myself in a well-appointed apartment, and while I was looking around me, the holy man said, "You will reside here," and left me. I lived in that charming place for about 40 days, and then the doctor came to me again. He found me better and said, "Walk in the garden and eat whatever fruits might take your fancy." He gave me a glass jar filled with a liquid and said, "Take daily a spoonful of this before you eat anything else." He then went back to his own abode, and I obeyed his instructions implicitly. One day, while looking around the apartment, after the servants had taken away my plates and cup from the meal of the morning, I saw a great bookcase, packed from top to bottom with the rarest books on every subject. Thereafter I read and read and read, all about the arts and sciences of the times, past and present, and of the mystic art of philters, every day. 1 year passed. I had not realized that I had been in residence there so long. The holy doctor came in and said to me, "Come." We went out of the gate, and a huge crowd was soon following him. After his customary bathe in the river, he was ready once more to examine and prescribe. It so happened that one young man, scarcely able to stand on his feet, attracted his attention. He said, "Bring that young man to me." He went into his private apartment and performed an operation on the young man's skull. He opened up a small part of the brain and attempted to seize with his instrument a small worm which was curled there. Being suddenly struck with an idea, I said quickly, "If you will heat the forceps in the fire and apply the heat to the worm, it will come out by itself. If you attempt to pull it out, it will cling to the brain, and the man's life will be forfeit." After I had spoken, the old man looked very steadily at me for a full minute. Then, dropping his forceps, went out into the garden. I followed in a short time. As he did not return, I saw to my horror that he had hung himself. I went and examined him, but he was quite dead. I took him down from the tree, and 2 keys fell from the folds of his loincloth. I then buried him and went into the house. I tried the keys in the locks of all the doors, and I found that they fitted the doors of 2 rooms. These were filled from floor to ceiling with precious stones. There was one chest covered with green velvet which caught my eye, and I opened it. I saw in it a book which was inscribed with the words in gold lettering, "The Most Awful of Names." I sat down and read through it then and there, and found that it contained instructions how to contact the genii and fairies, and the mode of conversation with spirits, how to subdue them, and how to charm the sun itself. This was such a wonderful book that I became quite cheerful, and was thinking about how I could best put this new knowledge into practice. I covered the magic book in a silken handkerchief, and carried it with me into the garden. There I gave instructions that all the jewels and valuables of those 2 rooms should be packed up, so that I could embark with them upon the long journey home. At last I arrived at the country of my birth, and approached my father. I kissed his feet, and said, "May I be allowed to live in my former garden?" "Son," he said, "the place appears to me to be of unfortunate aspect, so I have forbidden its being kept up. The spot is not fit for anyone's abode at the present time. Live anywhere else you may desire, but leave that accursed place alone. You had better live somewhere in the fort, so that you are under my personal supervision in case your illness recurs." But I resisted my father to the best of my ability, and had the old garden of my youth repaired, until it was once more returned to its pristine glory. There I walked and thought my own thoughts, and fasted 40 days to subdue any jinn which might have attached themselves to me. When the 40 days were gone, a most dreadful hurricane swept the land, and huge trees fell like saplings, buildings were razed to the ground, and an army of fairies appeared to me. A throne was manifested in mid-air, and upon this there sat an enchanted male being of the most wonderful presence, richly dressed, with a crown of pearls. I greeted him with much respect, and he replied in a like vein. He said at once, "O friend, why have you raised us in this manner with such unseemly commotion? Why do you need to see me?" "O king of the jinn," I gasped, "I have long been in love with your daughter, and for her sake I have been nearly out of my wits for years. Though living, I am yet dead in every meaning of the word. Please, I beg you 1,000,000 times, allow me to have but one glimpse of her, that I may—" "Human being," said he, stopping me in mid-sentence, "any connection between us, who are composed of fire, and you, who are made of earth, is impossible. I only desire to see her again, even for a moment," I cried from my heart. "I have no other purpose but to set eyes upon she whom I love so dearly." Again the king of the jinn replied, "Man does not always do as he promises. In time of stress he may say anything. I tell you seriously, if you are not careful, both you and she will be ruined forever." I renewed my oath that I wished to see her for only a short moment, to ease my aching heart. At that moment the beautiful fairy princess appeared, as if out of nowhere, beside her father's throne. She was so splendidly adorned that my eyes were dazzled, and I embraced her fondly. I tasted the pleasure of her lips, and sat with her in the garden. She was pleased that I had been so faithful to her memory, and showed me every kindness. "Here is one piece of advice I need to give you," said she, earnestly. "Look after your magic book, the most awful of names, for the evil jinn will try to take it away from you. I am sure of that." I replied, "I will guard the book as I will my life." But Satan led me astray, for as I was clasping my love to my heart, a voice called out very loudly, "The book! The book! Give me the book!" I at once put my hand into my pocket and gave the book to whom I knew not, so besotted was I with the princess. The beautiful fairy, seeing what I had done, began to cry out, "Oh, foolish man! You have so soon disregarded my advice! We are lost!" At that moment she became unconscious, and I saw an ugly jinni standing beside us, holding the book in his hand. I tried to snatch it away from him, but he passed it immediately to another, who ran off with it. The lovely fairy did not regain her senses, but remained in a state of stupor, then disappeared. Since that time, all my joys were turned to bitterness. I avoided everyone, and have lived in a corner of this garden alone. For the sake of doing something with my mind, I made this emerald vase, and every month I go to the plain, mounted on that same dun-coloured bull, break the vase and kill a slave, in order that someone may see me and pity me. Perhaps someone may pray for me, for I feel utterly forsaken. O friend, this is the sad tale of my madness. I said, "O prince, you have truly suffered for love. I will try to help you. I will go through the whole world to find the remedy for your trouble." Having made this promise, I took my leave of the prince, and for the last 5 years have wandered through land after land, looking for some help for him. But I found no trace of the beautiful fairy for whom he pined so cruelly, and became very disconsolate myself. I recently climbed a mountain and wished to throw myself into the abyss, when the same green-veiled horseman who saved you from destruction came up and said, "Do not destroy your life. In a few days you will have the desire of your heart." O Dervishes, I have at last seen you. I have now hope that joy and happiness will be our lot, as it has been prophesied.